Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. WWE alum Al Snow performs live in the nation's capital this Saturday at the DC Comedy Loft. He joined me to discuss his memoir, Self-Help Life Lessons from the Bizarre Wrestling Career of Al Snow, from talking to a mannequin head to his ill-fated chihuahua Pepper, sparking the infamous Kennel from Hell match. Hey, Al Snow. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP in Washington, D.C.
Hey, thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, we're talking because you are coming to the DC Comedy Loft on Saturday, April 8th. Now, this is your debut at the Comedy Loft, right? But how long have you been doing the stand-up just in general?
Not much. I'm still pretty much a virgin, a babe in the woods, so to speak. So if anybody shows up, please, take it easy on me. But I've been enjoying it. It's been a lot of fun. Nobody's thrown fruits or vegetables at me while I'm on stage yet. So
Yeah.
I think yeah. But I think I'm doing okay. So
Awesome. Yeah, we interviewed your old pal Mick Foley. He came to the DC Improv, and several wrestlers. You said, "I'm sorry." Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. You guys are always roasting each other. So tell me, why is your show better than Mick's?
Well, when Mick was a professional wrestler, he would tell everybody in the locker room, when I get done, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. We all would laugh and laugh, and now he's a stand-up comedian and nobody's laughing. So,
yes, don't underestimate that guy or Al Snow. Don't underestimate either of you. Multi-talented. I see you're wearing the collar elbow clothing line T-shirt too.
Yeah.
Plug away. Free plug.
Oh, collarandelbowbrand.com. It is basically we decided to try to make a clothing brand for professional wrestling fans, something that was cool and had designs that conveyed a certain message. If you're a wrestling fan, if you're not a wrestling fan, you can wear it to any type of function so that you don't get that oh, you like wrestling? Oh, that stuff's fake. And it's like, hey, congratulations, Murder, She Wrote. How long did it take for you to put the clues together there, Angela Lansbury?
I hate that. It's like, it's just as real as every other movie and TV show.
Spider-Man was a documentary about a young man. Yeah.
Exactly. But that's why we love it. We love the storylines and everything. Speaking of which, real quick, a current wrestling question before I want to get into your show. But
sure, yeah.
Wrestling fan. Did you catch WrestleMania the other night?
I didn't. Unfortunately, I missed both Saturday and I missed Sunday. But I heard that it was just absolutely incredible. And I mean, what a testament to what a entertainment powerhouse WWE is to be able to draw 81,000 people, not one night, but two nights concurrently. I mean, it just insane. Really is.
I personally miss when it was all one day, but I'm sure it gets more paydays for the.
Oh yeah.
So I get it. Yeah. I get it. But it's a big commitment. But the storyline, the Bloodline storyline, the Usos finally lost the tag title Saturday, and everyone thought Roman was going to lose on Sunday, but he beat Cody Rhodes.
I know, but what a great story. You know what I mean? To now, to watch Cody have to climb that hill and, climb that mountain. And, by SummerSlam, I mean, what emotionally, what would a win having to traverse all of those challenges really mean in comparison? My first gut reaction was, boy, I don't know. Everybody really, it was the right thing to do at the right time. But, to draw it out and to make it mean even that much more potentially is even that much better. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're like an expert of how it all works behind the scenes. Like, do you think the idea?
I wouldn't say that.
More than me, more than most of us. But do you think the idea is they're trying to let Roman hit that 1,000 day mark before they have him drop it, or not really?
No. The focus is really totally on Cody. You have to understand that you no matter what form of storytelling you undertake, whether it be literature, whether it be stagecraft, whether it be acting, really professional wrestling is nothing more than it's physical storytelling within the context of a competitive situation. And, you know, in order to do that, the rules always apply, which is you have to have an antagonist, you have to have a protagonist, and then you have to create a challenge, something that your protagonist has to overcome and reach a goal that the antagonist is preventing. And, you know, if that had already been done for Cody, well, where do you go? You know, what do you, where, do you create a new mountain for Cody to climb? Or do you do you make the mountain steeper? Do you make the mountain more of a challenge? Do you put more rocks in the way? You know, and that's what they're doing. And then thus, hopefully, you know, making the audience want to see Cody win. Thus, when Cody wins, they ultimately win, you know, and it'll mean that much more.
That's a great point, because you're right. The big WrestleMania payoff blow-off maybe could have worked if they'd had that year of Cody climbing the mountain. But since he got injured with the pec, you're right. It might have been rushed to have him come back, you know, number 30, win the Rumble, and then immediately win it at Mania. I think you're right. Build it out. Make the climb
from a business standpoint, you have a talent that is not really totally 100% at this point integrated into WWE as far as the fans' perspective. And the reason that he's not is not because he wasn't there prior. It's because he left. He literally established a company that is running opposition to WWE.
AEW.
And then, AEW. And, you know, the last thing you want to do as far as a wrestling promoter is you never want to take one of their Cody wasn't a mid-card guy, but he wasn't really truly at the top either. Right. But you don't want to take him now, and before he earns his way and becomes truly integrated into the company, you don't want to let him just waltz in and then he goes to the very top, because now you've just psychologically told all of the fans that their kind of upper mid-card guy is now better than all of yours.
That's a good point. I guess kind of like with your era with the invasion angle, you know, the NWO guys came in and they Scott Hall had to lose to Austin, and Hogan lost to The Rock before. Well, then Hogan, that's a whole different thing. Hulk Hogan's a different thing. They gave him the strap after that, but he's Hulk Hogan. But anyway, let's get back to your. Thanks for indulging me on.
No worries.
But I love this stuff. You can't tell. But yeah, tell me about your show. Like, what is it like? Stand up? Is it interacting with the audience? Like, what all do you talk about? Wrestling days, new stuff.
I literally, because you know, my brain's basically scrambled eggs. So CTE is a real issue. So I talk about everything. I make jokes. I tell jokes. I tell road stories. Some of them very bizarre, but they're, from my perspective, completely hilarious. And you know, and then I also interact with the audience as well. So, you know, I really, I can't really call it stand up, because I always sit on a stool and I just sit back and just start talking, and then, you know, whatever comes in my head is what I basically put out there.
So it's sit down comedy.
Yeah, it's sit down comedy. Yeah, not a lot of energy. You know what I mean? It's really. I'm 60, for God's sakes.
Yeah, well, it's a really intimate venue. I've been there before, so if you ever, you know, had questions for Al Snow, you'll be right up close and personal. It'll be really cool.
Oh, and you know, hopefully, usually I try to give a certain amount of time at the end of the, you know, set. People want to ask questions. You know, they're more than willing. You know, I'm more than willing to accept any questions that anyone wants to ask. But I've had, you know, really bizarre. I didn't realize it until as I got older, and then you know, I started just accepting the irony of being a part of professional wrestling, and I would go out and I would have opportunities to do other things, like, you know, I'd be on a film set and I'd be, you know, doing some acting and things like that, and you think, well, these people are from Hollywood, they're gonna, you know, they've seen and heard everything. And they'd start asking questions, and I would start telling some stories, and they're like, "There's no way that didn't happen. That's not possible." And I'm like, it's not like I make this stuff up. Yeah. I mean, it literally, you know, has been my life for 41 years, since I was 18 years old. So, you
Well,
know.
you mentioned Bizarre. I mean, that's actually part of you just released a book, right? Self-help life
Oh,
lessons from the bizarre wrestling career of Al Snow. So there
yeah,
you
yeah. And I've learned a lesson from every bizarre experience, you know. I was 18 in Detroit to go to some after party, you know, and pull up on a God knows what side of Detroit it was at that time, and you know, witnessed two prominent professional wrestlers disappear and begin to come back out and shoot hard boiled eggs out of their rear ends at, you know, for distance. So uh, I was 18 years old. You know what I mean? And and then it's just went from there.
Oh my gosh. Well, wow. Okay. Well, there are some
Yeah,
bizarre experiences in there.
yeah, but they're funny. I mean, it's
Funny,
you
yeah.
know, if you really think about it, you're
Hilarious.
just like,
That,
wow.
that's
Yeah,
great. Well, I would love to let's chronologically, you mentioned that was when you were 18, but I'd love to
yeah,
move
yeah.
chronologically if we can. I know you were born in Ohio, what, in 63. Who'd you root for?
63.
Who'd you root for growing up? Like how'd you what you know,
Oh
on
God,
TV?
it was hard, you know, because where I lived in a little town called Lima, Ohio. If anyone knows, you know, it's only made famous because of Glee, Buckwheat. Eddie Murphy had Buckwheat get assassinated in Lima, Ohio, and
And Al Snow, of
it's
course.
yeah, Al Snow, yeah. Hugh Downs and Phyllis Diller were from Lima, Ohio. I'm now the most famous person I feel from Lima, Ohio because they're both dead. So I knew I would outlast them. So, you know, they would finally, you know, tap out.
Right.
Uh, and uh, we had, if you were in Lima, you were either a Sox or Cubs, if it was baseball, or Indians or Reds or Steeler or Pirates or Detroit Tigers, because we had access to all of those
Right.
there, and we had football was, you know, the Bears. You had the Lions in Detroit. You had the Bengals in Cincinnati. You had the Cleveland Browns, and you had the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then, you know, hockey was the Red Wings,
Yeah.
Blackhawks. You know, didn't have a team in Cincinnati, didn't have a team in Cleveland,
Well,
but you
how'd you
had, you
discover
know,
wresling though? Like, were you watching pro wrestling on TV or how did you?
oh yeah. At that time when I was a kid, and actually, you know, when wrestling was more regional, more territorial back in the days, Ohio and Michigan and were always very prized as far as territories because you had so many major cities that were within merely hours of each other that you could run major events, and they were huge population centers. And so for a promoter, it was an opportunity to make a lot of money. And I grew up watching Ed Farhat, who was the original Sheik. He had big time wrestling out of Detroit that came into he owned all of Michigan, all of Ohio, part of Western Pennsylvania, part of Eastern Indiana, part of Northeastern Kentucky, you know, and all those major cities. So
Yeah.
started watching as a kid. Then it kind of disappeared in the mid 70s. And then, you know, crazy as it may seem for a lot of people out there, we did not have cable television. That wasn't in existence. So where I lived, you had maybe one, maybe two channels that you could get. And then when we got cable television, you know, we were able to access all 13. Yeah, 13 channels. Hold on to your hats. And
Premium package.
that's it. And one of those channels was TBS, Turner Broadcasting. And then Saturday nights, you know, Georgia Championship Wrestling came in at 6 o'clock. That became 6:05. And you know, that was it. You know, at 14, I was like, I'm going to be a professional wrestler. And 41 years later, nobody's figured out that I have no clue what I'm doing. So
Keep making it till you make it. I love
yeah,
it.
that's it. Yeah.
Take me back real quick. I want to get into some WWF stuff because that's where I did, and many of us discovered you. But even before that, I know you. I guess you done jobber stuff against Jannetty and Undertaker, like early '90s WWF. But tell me about ECW, and Smoky Mountain Wrestling those days. Did you have any favorite? I guess you wrestled Sabu in ECW, and you teamed with Kane, Glenn Jacobs to beat Rock and Roll Express and Smoky Mountain. Is that right?
Well, yeah, yeah. The way that happened was, I'd been wrestling for probably full time, for a living for probably, I don't know, at that point, probably 10, 11, 12 years. And doing, just fine. But I had the moniker of being the best kept secret in professional wrestling, which is a very wonderful compliment for a year. And then you're like, hey, let's start telling the secret. You
Then
know
the
what I
secret
mean?
needs to be out.
Yeah, we need to get it out. And um, what happened was, you know, uh, I had a opportunity to work with Sabu, and Sabu went to Paul Heyman, and I went in to start initially. The first time I went to ECW, start to work in ECW, and then Cornette. I trained Dan Severn, who is in the UFC Hall of Fame and all of that, actually for his first UFC, which was UFC 4 out in Tulsa, and I was a corner man and made some smart alecky comments, and Jimmy had seen me on the pay-per-view, offered me an opportunity, and I went to Smoky Mountain, and that parlayed into an opportunity with WWF at the time. And after about 2 years, I tried to quit WWF, asked for my release. They
Why?
wouldn't let me
Because the
do it.
gimmicks, Avatar and New Rockers, or you
I
didn't like what
just
you're doing?
I knew I had to go somewhere else so that they could see me as something else,
Right.
and I knew that if I stayed there, I would always remain in the same spot. So I had to leave, and asked for my release. They rolled the contract over, wouldn't let me quit, and that didn't make my attitude any better. And Chris Candido, God bless him, when he and Paul Heyman showed up at a TV. I talked to Chris, he talked to Paul, Paul talked to Bruce Pritchard, and they put me on loan basically to ECW where I could reinvent myself.
Cool.
And that's where I met Head, and it was love at first sight. We caught eyes across the room in New Britain, Connecticut, and
We're talking about his mannequin, folks.
Yeah, we're talking about
But wait, didn't Mick start that with Cactus Jack? You two together were like saying like a promo.
So what had happened was, because I was reading a book on abnormal psychology at the time, trying to show that I had a nervous breakdown, and I found a styrofoam head in the locker room in Philadelphia at the ECW arena, the Alhambra arena, and we took some photos for a Japanese magazine, and I thought, you know what? Because I remembered a case study, a woman who was schizophrenic, and she had what they call transference disorder, where she transferred her illness onto the objects she heard the voices from. She thought they were crazy, not her. So I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, carry this styrofoam head with me to the ring, and I'm going to treat it as if it's insane, and I'm not. And the impetus or the inspiration for that was one night we were in California, and it was Bob Holly and Sid Vicious and myself and Mick in the car, and Mick had a styrofoam head in his bag that he kept the Mankind mask on to retain its shape and its form.
So you're back to WWF at this point then?
WWF, yeah. Yeah, this was prior to ECW, and Mick had, it had a little chunk cut out of its mouth, and he was calling it Elaine in the back seat, like when he got back to his hotel room, he was going to do, pornographic things with the styrofoam head. And I remembered him doing that, and I remembered the case study of the lady with the transference disorder, and I had a styrofoam head, and I thought, I'm going to treat this as if it's a real person, and that they're crazy, and I'm not. And that was the beginning of Head.
And a legendary gimmick was born. The fact that of all the things in the Attitude Era, I mean, there was a lot of stuff, Val Venis and the rest, but the fact that you got a whole crowd to say, what does everybody want?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Well, I know we're really short on the clock, but I have to ask, Job Squad, of course, great stuff, but I don't know if we have time for that. But I have to ask you about Pepper. I mean, Big Boss Man eating your chihuahua.
Yeah, it was it was inspired by a real story. And it's appalling to a lot of people when I tell it. And that's, how crazy the wrestling business is. There was a professional wrestler named Mr. Fuji. And apparently he had a neighbor he hated. and it was very obnoxious and had a very obnoxious dog. And the neighbor went to work, and Mr. Fuji apparently kidnapped the dog. The neighbor, very distraught, looked for the dog for weeks, and finally Mr. Fuji invited him over for dinner. And what they had for dinner that he served to the neighbor was his own dog.
In real life.
In real life, yeah.
So you said, let's do this as a storyline.
Well, I didn't say that. I mean, it was somebody else that had thought that it would be a good storyline, and I was like, well, okay, let's see where it goes. And then, we ended up in the Kennel from Hell. Little did I know that name would be so apropos. With from day one, I kept saying, okay, as long as we have trained animals. I mean, because let's face it, people even in porn know that you don't work with children and animals. They'll always upstage you. So
I remember, weren't the dogs like going crazy doing their own thing?
They were literally urinating, defecating, and fornicating to the point where they couldn't show them on camera.
And here you are trying to have a match for all that.
And literally built the whole crux of the story around the dogs. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it didn't work. Yeah.
Infamous moments. But chalk it up to another, quote, bizarre moment from the life lessons of the book, and of course the DC Comedy Loft show. Al Snow, I could talk to you all day, but I know we're on a hard out here. So thanks so much. Again, it's Saturday, April 8th at the DC Comedy Loft. You were great.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody there, and we're really, I trust me, it'll be a lot of fun. It'll be a good time.
Oh yeah, and we didn't even get to ask Tough Enough here. So bring your questions. Oh yeah, Tough Enough. Bring all your questions, folks. He'll answer them.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I will.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.